Have you ever felt like your dream was too far out of reach? Like the world kept throwing punches, and no matter how hard you tried, life just wouldn't let up? Now imagine being a young boy from a tiny town in West Virginia. Poor, stuttering, and constantly reminded that you'll never make it. That was Steve Harvey's reality. And yet, against every odd, every obstacle, every heartbreak, he rose to become one of the most recognizable figures in American entertainment. So how did he do it? Let's break down Steve Harvey's incredible transformation and the powerful lessons we can all learn from it. Steve Harvey was born on January 17, 1957, in Welch, West Virginia, a coal mining town where opportunity was scarce and racism was a fact of life. His family was deeply working class. His father, Jesse Harvey, was a coal miner, and his mother, Eloise Vera, was a Sunday school teacher who instilled deep faith in him from a young age. They didn't have much, not even a proper bathroom for a while. Steve has spoken about growing up without hot water and sometimes going to school with clothes that didn't fit. He remembers kids laughing at him. But even worse, he remembers believing them. And yet, in the 6th grade, something small yet huge happened. During a classroom assignment, his teacher asked all the kids to write down what they wanted to be when they grew up. Steve wrote just 3 words, on television. His teacher was so shocked by his answer that she called his parents to express concern. She thought he was being unrealistic. But Steve never forgot that moment. He held on to that dream, literally. He kept that piece of paper in a drawer for decades as a reminder, because deep down, he knew something. Even if no one else could see it, he could. From the outside, a stutter might seem like a small hurdle, but for a young Steve Harvey, it was a wall, a massive, echoing barrier between the person he was and the person he wanted to be. Words would catch in his throat like they were fighting to escape. A simple hello could turn into an agonizing 10-second battle. Kids teased him, adults spoke over him, and slowly Steve began to internalize an ugly message that his voice didn't belong in the world. But deep down, something in him refused to stay quiet. He began working relentlessly to master his speech. He memorized poems, recited scriptures, and watched people who spoke freely, trying to crack the code. One of those people was Richard Pryor, a bold, electric comedian who didn't just talk, he owned every word. Steve didn't just laugh, he studied. He watched how Pryor moved, how he paused, how he connected. Something clicked. Comedy wasn't just entertainment, it was power. And Steve wanted that power too. But wanting it didn't mean he had it. When Steve first stepped onto a comedy stage, it wasn't exactly a triumphant debut. He bombed. And not just once. For a long time his name wasn't written on marquees, it was scribbled in the back of notebooks under Next Act. He drove for hours to perform for 3 minutes in front of half-empty rooms. Sometimes he crushed it. Other times the silence after his punchline felt louder than the laugh track he dreamed of hearing one day. And behind every shaky mic stand was the same reality. Steve was broke. Not tight on money broke, sleeping in his car, washing in public restrooms, rationing 1 sandwich for a day broke. He'd pull up to gigs hoping the promoter didn't flake so he could buy gas to make it to the next one. No safety net, no backup plan, just raw belief and a growing set of battle scars. But here's what set Steve apart. He never let the struggle become his story. It was just the setting. He knew the stage would one day be his, and he was right. Steve Harvey's breakthrough didn't come in a flash of fame. It came in a moment of desperation. The kind of moment where most people fold, but Steve doubled down. It was 1993. He was still sleeping in his car, living off scraps between comedy gigs. No agent, no manager. Just a phone, a duffel bag, and a dream that hadn't paid off yet. One day, broke and emotionally drained, he received a call that would change the entire trajectory of his life. The message? He had a shot at performing on It's Showtime at the Apollo. Now, let's pause here. The Apollo wasn't just a gig. This was the proving ground. The Harlem stage where legends like James Brown and Ella Fitzgerald were born, and where the crowd didn't hesitate to boo you off if you weren't great. But Steve had just $35 to his name, enough for a one-way ticket to New York. No hotel, no backup plan. He made the trip anyway. That night, standing under the bright lights of the Apollo Theater, Steve Harvey didn't just perform. He lit up the room. His timing, his energy, his vulnerability, they weren't just funny, They were magnetic. The audience gave him a standing ovation. And more importantly, producers saw something special. They didn't just ask him back, they made him the permanent host. Overnight, everything changed. His phone started ringing. Comedy clubs that once passed on him were now offering headline spots. He was no longer sleeping in his car. He was finally living in his calling. That moment at the Apollo wasn't just a performance. It was a resurrection. A public declaration that this man who once couldn't speak without stuttering, who once cried in gas station bathrooms, was now standing center stage, and he wasn't leaving. But even while the world was clapping for Steve Harvey on stage, behind the curtain, his personal life was collapsing. Steve's first marriage ended in 1994, but it wasn't just a split, it was a storm. The divorce left deep emotional scars and fractured his family life, especially with his children. He's admitted publicly that he wasn't the man he should have been back then, caught between the rising demands of fame and the crumbling walls of a marriage he couldn't hold together. But it was his second divorce, in 2005, that nearly took everything. Financially, Steve was blindsided. He discovered that his accountant, someone he trusted for years, had been failing to send his tax payments to the IRS. He wasn't just behind on payments, he was under investigation. Steve said he owed over $20 million, and worse, he had no idea until it was almost too late. Imagine waking up one day thinking your finances are fine, only to find out you're drowning in debt you didn't even know existed. It wasn't just a number, it was his entire livelihood on the line. He was filming shows during the day, then crying in his dressing room between scenes. Everything he had worked for, every joke told in a smoky club, every dollar earned from syndication and books, was at risk of disappearing overnight. And if that wasn't enough, he was enduring one of the most bitter custody battles of his life. He didn't just feel broke, he felt broken. He said in an interview, "You think being famous makes you immune to pain? No, it just puts your pain in the public eye." But this wasn't the end. It was just the fire before the rebirth. For all the shows, books, and public triumphs Steve Harvey had built, nothing tested him more than his personal life. 2 divorces had left him not just emotionally drained, but spiritually empty. He was successful by every outside measure, but inside he was fragmented. That's when Marjorie Bridges re-entered his life. They had met years earlier, and Steve had once told her, "I'm gonna marry you one day." It sounded like a pickup line, but it turned out to be a prophecy. Years later, after life had knocked them both around, their paths crossed again. This time, it stuck. Marjorie wasn't just a romantic partner. She was Steve's mirror, reflecting the parts of himself he'd forgotten, the faith he had abandoned, the man he was trying to become. Where others saw a comedian, she saw a king. And more importantly, she held him to that standard. They married in 2007, and with that union came not just love, but responsibility. Together, they brought together a blended family of 7 children. That's not a merger. That's a full-on reconstruction, and Steve took it seriously. "I don't have stepchildren," he said. "These are all my kids, period." And it wasn't easy. Blending families means blending histories, hurts, habits, but Steve approached it the same way he approached everything else, with discipline, honesty, and deep-rooted values. He once said that the greatest thing a man can do for his children is love their mother, and that's exactly what he did. Marjorie brought more than family. She brought focus. She helped Steve create boundaries, balance work with rest, and reconnect with his spiritual foundation. Under her influence, mornings began with prayer. Conversations became more intentional. And his empire? It expanded, but with purpose this time. She didn't just help Steve rebuild. She helped him redefine what success actually looked like. Steve Harvey's story isn't just about success. It's about faith when you're flat broke, grit when everyone's laughing, forgiveness when you've been betrayed, and love that gives you another shot at life. He says, "Your career is what you're paid for. Your calling is what you're made for." Steve has clearly found his calling, not just to entertain, but to uplift. And that dream he wrote down in the 6th grade? Yeah, he's on TV now, every single day. If this story moved you, inspired you, or reminded you not to give up on your own dreams, hit that like button. Subscribe for more powerful, true stories that prove no matter how far you've fallen, you can always rise again. And don't forget to check the description. We've got more inspirational content, behind-the-scenes clips, and links to Steve Harvey's books and speeches if you want to dive even deeper. Keep believing, keep grinding, keep the faith. Because your story's not over yet.